The natural metaphor of an animal or lizard or fish or bird's tail works its way into our discussion of perhaps the most popular and enduring media theory of today. That is, the theory of the long tail. And it explains modern media economics, particularly today in the digital age. Technologies you probably know has revolutionized just about everything we do in the world of media. We've been given a world that has not only the simplicity of accessing media through various devices besides their traditional formats, but also easy reach through our iPhones, our Samsung devices of various kinds, uh, traditional screens, which are now accessible through cable networks and digital streaming services, and the list goes on. In essence, we watch, we read, we listen, all in the same place. Of course, this changes our world a bit. The old notions that we had about storing, retrieving, shopping, and those sorts of things have been not necessarily eliminated, but they've been added to. Digitalization has greatly reduced requirements for physical media. Paper and physical binding for books is optional now. You can still go to a traditional library or to Barnes and Noble or other independent bookstores. Records, tapes, CDs, sure, you can still get those too. You can actually order new vinyl albums, but you can also download it quickly or access it easily through services like Spotify. Uh, I don't know about Pandora, but yeah, that too, probably. And other services that make music instantly available to you. Amazon Music, Apple Music, those sorts of places. Film and videotape for movies are still available. Many people still go watch the movies physically in theaters. But again, these are all things that you can download, have accessible to you in mere seconds, or you can access them through things like Hulu, Peacock, Netflix, of course. So we have a much larger and some would say more democratic, potentially inexpensive way of getting classics, niche, specialty publications, and media of all sorts. We know that digital distribution is the key. It is the essence of long tail theory in many respects. This theory was popularized by Chris Anderson in 2004, starting with an article in Wired magazines. Anderson described how the internet transformed media economics and would continue to. And his predictions of 20 plus years ago still seem to be right on point. The long tail notion gives publishers, producers, and media much broader market reach, he argued, and it increases sales from less popular items. In other words, things that might have been taken on and sent out of print in the old era can be maintained and remain accessible for years to come at even though greatly reduced prices are still profitable. So the theory suggests that even low demand can create a collectively large market that makes it easy for uh, publishers to store and sell and distribute work, even with a very low profit margin, and that collectively this process can create a market that is significant, perhaps rivaling the popularity of blockbuster recent hits in effect. Changes brought about by Anderson's theory, the long tail theory, affect creating and storage, transport and sales, consumer access, and business profitability. We have lower costs Digital platforms reduce the cost of storing and distributing products, making it feasible to offer wide ranges of items. And the digital world has unlimited storage space when you think about it. Unlike traditional retailers, online stores can stock countless niche products without the constraints of physical space. A bookstore, for instance, does not have to mark down books as quickly, perhaps. They can let the demand continually guide them. They don't have to rush and decide suddenly to take a book that was yesterday selling for $30 and today mark it down to 10. They can gradually reduce according to demand. In the past, there were video stores that one week would have a popular, recently released movie that had just moved from theater to videotape or DVD. But a few weeks later, they'd have to be marking those down rather quickly because they simply did not have the physical space and they needed to get rid of what they then considered old, even they might have considered it obsolete material. Now, that so called obsolete material can still remain relevant and available to people who deem it so based on their particular interests. Say you're an old movie collector and want a clean Blu ray copy of an old film from the 30s or 40s or 50s. Some prime examples of this democratization and change in economics include the streaming services like Netflix and Spotify. Online retailers like Amazon utilize the long tail strategy by making access available to virtually everyone to a wide variety of products, including advantageously at their Prime members. This allows Amazon to cater to diverse consumer preferences. Virtually any kind of consumer of almost anything can find something there. So the long tail theory even works for people who prefer traditional media. You can order a book that was once popular maybe 20 or 30 years ago, and it's presumably out of print from a service like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and the book that arrives for you in the mail a couple days later will look brand new. That's because it is. It has been published through print-on-demand services from those providers and others. By the same token, an author might have a book that they have made published in what they call self-publishing, made available through Amazon in a print version. That does not mean that Amazon has shelves of these ready to load up. It simply means that once you place the order, print on demand creates the book and it's ready to sell within virtually minutes. It's almost like making a photocopy. But what you will receive is a brand new looking book that was probably produced just a day or two ago. Same goes for things like DVDs. Certain people like to use their old DVD and Blu-ray players, and they can order old movies, say Gone with the Wind or Wizard of Oz or To Kill a Mockingbird, that are many, many years old and were never even initially available in those formats. But here again, in a day or two, you can have one in the mail that's ready to go into your player and watch. This presumably even extends to things like tapes and CDs in certain ways. So they can store the items easily digitally and then recreate them in physical format. Again, just another example of the long tail at work. Let's look to some economic realities that explain the long tail theory just a little bit more. Here we see a little graph that indicates on the one axis competition, and this area showing competition toward the top left is also an area of high profitability or high initial sales profitability. Down below, you see low competition and perhaps lower profitability, but still a broad market. So let's take a look at those three red arrows and presume that one of the arrows represents a popular book by a prominent author, or maybe it's not a prominent author. Maybe it's a well known celebrity publishing her first book, or perhaps a former president or former presidential candidate with a lot of name recognition, or perhaps a famous athlete has written his or her first book. These are all likely to have high initial demand and high profit to the publisher, who probably paid the writer a lot of money in the form of an advance. In initial weeks or months, they'll make the New York Times and other booksellers' bestseller lists, and they'll generate quite a bit of revenue. But then, over a period of time, there are newer releases up at the top, pushing the popularity of these down, and yet they will still be selling, and they may have recouped all their initial costs, so they're going to be profitable even at lower either sales rates, at lower demand, and that sort of thing. And they enter what is known as the long tail. And the long tail suggests, when you see it leveling out further down, representing perhaps many weeks, months, or years into the future, represents sustained sales for these works, even though, as I say, they have gone out of print, out of publication, and are out of the, I guess, key selling period in their life cycles. This represents something else. This could be a self published book by someone who has a marvelous family history that she might have presumed would be of interest to historians in the future, and she wanted to make her mark, so she wrote this book and got it self-published on Amazon digitally, where it can be stored and sold for years to come, and perhaps future historians will run across it and buy it for background or for detail and something they're creating or they're just interested in. Say the book is someone who is a good cook of Appalachian foods, and uh, she writes something like Aunt Nancy's Bluegrass Cooking Family Cookbook, and it sells. Obviously, members of her family buy it, but maybe members of her hometown saw an article about it in the local paper and snapped it up. But it still doesn't sell very much. But again, certain services with good long tail thinking and digital capabilities can make money on it, even if it only eventually sells for a couple of dollars. It may still sell for a couple of dollars many years ahead because of its characterization of the country and the cuisine style still catches people's attention, and it still sells, perhaps even outliving Aunt Nancy. Here we see the graph looking way into the future, and we see not only the three once popular books, movies, and musical works that we showed a few slides ago, but as I say, many years ahead, and there's the cookbook, and there's these once popular things who are all now, whether they started or not, in the niche long tail. So we've had a discussion here of the long tail, its theories, and some of its realities, and whether we're talking about books, music, movies, or other media creation, art. The vast digital inventories of Amazon and similar services include many obscure products and the popular things that we mentioned and the once popular things we've talked about. And it delivers really enormous benefits to everybody that creates and consumes virtually any kind of media nowadays. There are benefits to sellers, lower storage, distribution costs, and those sorts of things. Remarkable benefits for consumers, access to an entire world of media. Once obscure works would have been difficult to find. Now we can find them easily, not only through services like Amazon, but a number of specialty services that literally make old books, old movies, old recordings available for free. You can see things like this demonstrated on YouTube or Gutenberg Books, those kinds of places. And there are, of course, benefits to creators, to authors of books and other art, musicians, filmmakers, and content creators of all kinds. The long tail theory has enduring promise for everyone, really. And I believe it is a tale that will continue for a long, long time. Thank you.